Hello everyone, my name is Avery from Sacred Vision Studio, and today I am going to show you how to share and post your webcomic on ComicFury, a popular webcomic hosting site. Now, this is a popular comic site, but it is definitely not the biggest. If you have ever looked into webcomics, you probably know about webtoons, and webtoons is most definitely the most popular place to share your webcomic at. But the nice thing about ComicFury is it's a bit of a smaller community, but it is still a very active community. And what's also nice about this webcomic site is you have a lot more ability to edit how your webcomic is presented on its own website. And there's also a lot less restrictions with the type of content you can share on this webcomic site. Webtoons, I believe, is known for being a lot more stricter about what kind of comics and content is allowed on the site. So this site is ultimately a lot more freeing, and you ultimately are not going to be creatively manhandled by the website owners as much as webtoons would. So ultimately, that's kind of the nice thing about ComicFury. You have a bit more freedom to do what you want, and I think that's pretty great. And it's also owned, I believe, by a singular person, and they're keeping this site running, and it's pretty awesome that they've created such a great website for artists. So yes, today I'm going to show you how to create a new webcomic, and I'm just going to take you through the process of posting your first page and all that. So let's begin. Alright, so here we are creating our first webcomic. You can title your webcomic anything you want. It could be the greatest story ever told. Whoops. Let me fix that. Apologies. My keyboard is a little finicky with its typing and its letters lately. Sometimes L's and S's won't type in correctly. But yes, here's our title, The Greatest Story Ever Told. And then here we can pick our webcomic domain. You have a couple options here for the end of your URL, or URL, however you would like to pronounce that. We've got thecomicseries.com, thecomic.org, thecomicstrip.org, webcomic.ws, and cfw.me. Now, my personal favorite is thecomicseries.com, but you can choose whichever of these you'd like to be the end of your URL. When picking a domain name, you definitely are going to want to keep it to what your comic title is. But if you have a really long comic title, like The Greatest Story Ever Told, maybe simplify it a little bit. It could simply be greatest story. So there we go. We've got https://greateststory, thecomicseries.com, or .thecomicseries.com. And yeah, that's your domain URL or URL. We can pick a webcomic slogan. It can be a very simple description to describe your comic. I think a webcomic is a perfect way to describe this story. Then you can pick your copyrights over here. Oftentimes you will want to pick the years between the creation of the story, so when it first started, in my case 2025, up until the year it finishes, which of course is the present, so it is still the year 2025. And then you can also add all rights reserved at the end of your name. So, big comic author guy is my name. And we can just simply add all rights reserved. Then here we can put in a webcomic description. As I said in the slogan, it is indeed a webcomic. Continuing down, you can pick a webcomic language. If your comic is not English, well, you can pick anything you want. Or if there's no dialogue or text whatsoever in your comic, you could choose that. None or no text at all. But in my case, it probably would be an English story, so I'm going to keep it at that. But you do have options, so remember that. You've got a lot of options. Down here, we have webcomic art style. You can pick cartoonish, sprite, photographic, simplistic stick figure, golden age, furry, manga, or other. In my case, I am going to stick to cartoonish. Down here, we have genre. So you can pick up to 3 genres for your comic. It could be a horror, science fiction, mystery, or maybe it's an action fantasy romance. You can pick whatever genres you'd like, but you can only pick up to 3. Continuing down here, we have tags. Now, tags are useful because it helps people when searching for webcomics on the website. And for instance, maybe you want to put in a genre that wasn't listed up here. For instance, I don't see superhero up here, so I could add superhero as a tag. Maybe your story is whimsical. Or perhaps your story is Lovecraftian. Yeah, there's a lot of different options you can pick here. So if there are any genres missing from this list, add them into the tags. Down here we have the flags. So if your story has violence or any other adult themes, make sure you flag it correctly. You don't want to get into trouble. Continuing down here, we have layouts. So, when it comes to picking a layout, remember that you can change your layout later on. And if you know HTML or JavaScript, you can also make a lot of edits to your website and customize it to your own fashion. Now, I'm not as well educated in HTML or JavaScript as I should be, so I haven't made much, if at all, any changes to my website. But you can pick one of these pre-made layouts. So if you click on one of the layouts, it will take you to an example page to show you what it will look like. Obviously, there's no comic image, but it gives you a sense of what the site will look like. Alright, so once you've picked out your layouts, you can continue down. Here we have a few more settings. So, allow ratings. So this allows people to rate your comic, and this will allow your comic to be found on the site when they search or when it is sorted based on ratings. So I'd allow ratings on your site personally, but you can also choose to opt out of it if you don't want to. Allow comments. I think this site is pretty nice. The community is very welcoming, I feel like, so I'm totally okay with comments. But again, if you do not want comments, that is perfectly fine. You can turn that off if you don't want comments. Voluntarily display ads to support ComicFury. I highly recommend you turn this on because this webcomic site, as I said before, is independently run and owned, and I feel like it is only right to help and support them by turning on ads. Unless you want to support them in other ways, I do believe they have a Patreon, but I personally would pick to turn on ads to help support the site. Down here, we can choose what the front page of your webcomic will look like. So this is when someone clicks the link to check out your site. This is going to decide where they first appear at. And a lot of people will leave latest comic on their website. So when someone clicks the link to go to the comic, the first thing they will see is the latest comic released, the latest post. I personally don't like this. Personally, I feel like this can lead to the audience being spoiled, because they could end up seeing a big dramatic reveal happen because they end up on the latest comic. And I don't think that's a good idea to spoil your audience. Obviously, they may not know what's happening, but I just don't see it as a good idea to have your comic set to latest. I personally would choose the very first comic or the start of the latest chapter. Either of these I feel like are the best options for where people should start when they first enter your webcomic site. Comic Archive is also great. Blog Archive or Webcomic Overview, which contains the latest blogs and comic page. But as I said, I feel like first comic, latest chapter, or Comic Archive are probably the best options to choose from. Here you can choose whether you want to have a chapter system or not. I personally would keep that on. I think you're going to want to keep your chapter system on unless you have a really short story. Enable comic search. So when you create a webcomic site, there will be a search function on your site. And I personally would turn this off if you think you're going to write a very short story. Maybe a comic under 100 pages. But if you intend on having a big comic with lots of pages and lots of chapters, maybe leave that on. I would recommend it being left on if you think you're going to have a lot of content and a lot of pages on your comic. And finally, you can choose to review or moderate comments. I personally leave this off because I don't get enough comments to have any need to moderate. And I'm also just kind of lazy about, moderating, honestly. But if you end up having lots of comments, if your comic becomes popular, you may want to turn this on. And a lot of these options on this settings page, I think you'll be able to change later on anyhow, so don't really get hung up on things if you're not sure. But yeah, so now we have pretty much completed all of this, and now we can create our new webcomic. Now, I am not personally going to press this because I already have a webcomic that I will use as an example of how to post a comic page. So let's check out my webcomic. Alright, so assuming you have created an account, you can go over here onto the My Webcomics page. And by clicking on it, you will get a list of all the webcomics you have. And as you can see, I have a couple here. Gingerberry is the current series I am working on, and I also have a one-shot. And I also have another comic that I put into private, so no one can see this on the website. That's another nice thing. You can, if you are working on a comic but are not yet ready to release it to the world, you can put it on private mode. You have a couple options over here. You can click on Manage, add a comic strip, edit comic pages, view webcomic, or webcomic statistics. Now, you'll have these different options when you click on Manage or webcomic statistics, so it really doesn't matter. I'm going to go click over here on webcomic statistics, and as you can see, I can now take a look at what my webcomic has been doing when it comes to visitors. So we have the visitor statistics here, and each of these dots represents a day. And the green line represents the pages viewed in scroll mode. The red represents pages viewed in website mode. And then the blue represents visitors. So if I look at one of these spikes over here on the blue, I can see on Friday, March 21st, I got 73 visitors. And when I look at the green, I got 139 pages viewed in scroll mode. And if I look at the red, I had 205 pages viewed on the website view. So I really love this about ComicFury, that I got all these statistics and I can view how my webcomic has been doing. And if I look down here, I got some more information. Last update, the number of comics I've released, 43 so far. Number of subscribers, 22. Visitors, 3,382. And over 9,000 pages viewed. And then I've got a rating of 5 with 2 votes. And then I also have comments left, 41. It needs to be understood, though, that every time I leave a comment under my comic page, that also counts as a comment. I've probably only had maybe a little less than 20 comments left by readers. But I really do love this about ComicFury. They show you my statistics, and I don't know, it feels good to know that my comic is being viewed. And every spike represents a day that I released a new page for my comic. So I release new pages every Friday for Gingerberry. So over here I have my upload options and a lot of different settings over here. And I'm not going to go through everything. I'm just going to show you the most important stuff. So I'm going to upload a comic page. Alright, when you are adding a brand new page to your comic, you can give that page a title. I will always number my comic pages, so I am posting page 10 today. Now, the fun thing is, even though I am doing numbers, I can always add a little, I don't know, something at the end. I could say page 10, something big happens. Big happens. Whoa. Now, I don't personally do this, but I'm just saying that you can add a little slogan or whatever to the end of your number if you'd like to. But I do recommend you still use numbers for your comic page title, because otherwise people might get confused when they're trying to find a particular page. Here we have mouse over text. So this is text that will appear when a visitor hovers over the image of your comic. It can be a description or an additional punchline. I don't personally do this. If you'd like to, you can do that yourself. I personally don't have the time or the energy to really bother with this, but you can add something if you'd like to. Over here, we have chapter. So you can select a chapter that you want this page, whatever page that may be, to be included in. Right now, I am on chapter 1 of my comic, and it is page 10. So I am going to leave it on chapter 1. But just to give you an example of creating a chapter, I am going to add a chapter to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to add a chapter. And here we can create a chapter name. So as an example, I'm going to create chapter 2. I'm just going to call it that for right now. And then you can add a chapter description. So if you look at some of my existing chapters down here, they have description. So Treetop Trouble. Description is first proof of concept chapter for Gingerberry. The Beast, Halloween short. A Halloween short. Production art and extras. Number 1, additional content. Chapter 1, the first official chapter of Gingerberry. So you can add whatever description you want to your chapter. I am simply going to leave it as an example. Then you can pick chapter order number, and this is set at 50 right now. The number determines in which order the chapters are shown on the archive page. The chapter with the lowest order number will be shown first. So as you can see here, you can even see the order numbers on these previous chapters. So chapter 2 is already set for 50, which means it will appear after chapter 1, which is what I would want. But you can actually pick any number you want. You could set this at 41 and it would still be set after chapter 1, or I could pick 39, which would then make it appear between production art and extras and chapter 1, but I don't want that, so we'll leave that at 50. And then finally, you can pick a cover image for your comic. The maximum file size is 5,120 KB, and the maximum dimensions is 4,000 by 4,200 pixels. I am not going to add a file because I don't need to. This is simply an example that I am giving you all, and I don't need to do that. We'll create this chapter. I'm going to add it just to show you it appearing. So I'm going to add chapter, flawless victory. I added a brand new chapter. There it is. Chapter 2 has been added, and it is in front of chapter 1. I'm going to exit out of here. I do not know if I need to refresh this page or not, or if it will appear. So let's find out. Nope, it does not appear. So I'd have to refresh in order to see my brand new chapter 2. But I'm not going to bother with that because, as I said, that was simply for an example, and I'm not going to do anything more there. Now you can add a file. There is some limits to uploading your comic page. Well, first of all, you can upload it from a file on your computer. You can pick an external image URL, or you can create a custom HTML embed code. And you can even pick multiple images for your page. I am not going to do that. I personally only do 1 pages at a time, but you can do this if you so desire. It is recommended that your comic page stay under 5 megabytes. And if you do multiple images, keep them under 2 megabytes each. And finally, it is also recommended that your comic page is under 950 pixels wide. Now, every time I finish a comic page, I export it and then create a second image that is then much smaller. And that exported image I will keep under 950 pixels. In width, the height can be made much bigger if you'd like. But yeah, I do try to keep the width under 950 pixels. Alright, I am going to now upload my comic page. And I have successfully uploaded my comic page. It has popped up right there. And now we are going to continue onwards. I am going to skip author comment for right now because I'll come up with something later. But your author comment can be anything. It can be something related to the chapter, process you may have gone through for creating your comic. You can give people updates and just generally try and engage with the community and just have fun. So do something fun with your author comment. Maybe leave links to where people can find you, all that good stuff. Down here, we can pick a release date. So for this comic, I am going to set the 18th of April. So I can click right there, and it is set for the 18th of April, 2025. And then I want to pick an hour. You can pick any time you'd like. I kind of feel like the noon is a great time for releasing your comic. I feel like 12 o'clock, maybe 12:30 is a really good time to release a comic. I've released my comic as early as like 8:30 in the morning, but you can pick any time you'd like. And I'm going to set it to 12 p.m. on April 18th. Then down here you have a couple extra options. You can add archive tags, and this will help people find your comic when searching with that search bar that I mentioned earlier. But I don't really personally add any archive tags. I just don't see a need to. You can add a transcript, which can be script from your comic, and you can add it down here again to help people find and search your comic. But I don't really feel a need to do that. Again, if your comic is going to be really big and you plan on having that search function be a part of your website, sure, these two things could be useful to add information into, but I really don't need to do that personally. So with all that said, this page is now ready for release. I am going to save this page, update it, but before I do so, I'm going to also show you a little trick with the author comment that I think is worth sharing. So on your website and over on these settings over here, you can add extra files to your comic. So let's check that out real quick. And you have to keep these files small. They have to be under 6 megabytes, but you can add them to your website. And as you can see, I have an extra image down here. It's a image called call to action. If I click on this, you can take a look at the image right here. And here we have the link. So I'm going to copy the link. Now I can go back to my author comment area and I can add an image. And here I'm going to paste my link. So there we go. We've got the Gingerberry comic series file call to action PNG. I'm just going to click OK. And then this will make the image appear within my author comment. So this is just a cool little trick that I'm letting you know about already. I think this is kind of useful. It makes your comic look a little bit more professional when you're sharing with people. I'll take time to consider what it is that I'm going to say for this day later. For now, I am going to press update. And it was a flawless victory, as you can see right here. So I'm pretty happy with that. And that is how you create a comic for this website. If I go into edit delete comics, I can kind of take a look at all the different comics that I have shared on this site already. I've had previous chapters, and as you can see the different names I've given the different pages: cover, page 01, 04, 09, 13, 18, and then we have a new chapter, cover 05, 07, and then I had some extra artwork that I was sharing for a couple of days here, and then I was back to a brand new comic. Or start of a new chapter. And here you can also take a look at the different chapters and what pages are included in those different chapters. And yeah, you can make edits and changes and all that fun stuff. Another neat thing that you can do is you can mass upload comics. I have not personally done this, but you can choose multiple files, and I'm going to guess they allow you to kind of just mass create multiple pages, similar to what we already did with the single page, but you can choose a bunch of files all at once and kind of just quickly go through them all and edit the dates for when you want to release them and the author comments and so forth. You can manage comments, you can manage chapters. Again, you're taken to this page, which basically was the add new chapter page where we've already been. And you can edit some of your comic chapters. And as you can see here, we can edit chapter 2. I can add a cover if I wanted to. I can change the order number. I can change the chapter description, all that good stuff. And finally, I'm going to show you a few things in the settings. You can change the webcomic profile info. Here you can, again, basically change everything that we already had done when we first created the comic. You can edit the settings. And here you can decide a few things about your comic, like, do you want your comic to be visible? Yes, of course I do. But like you saw before with one of my earlier comics, I had it on private, so that was set to no. So you can choose to have your comic visible, yes. You can also choose to have it visible but hide it from ComicFury, which basically means that only people who get the link to your comic can read it. But again, I wouldn't recommend doing that because I think people need to see your comic on ComicFury, so leave that visible. Here's a few functionality settings. Use a chapter system, yes. Enable visitor statistics, yes, I like that. Enable comic search, again, I leave it on, yes, but honestly, I don't really know if I need that for this comic, but again, you can choose whatever it is you want. Use comic image as a link to the next page. Yes, so if someone clicks on the image, they will be sent to the next page. Very simple. Advertisement settings, no advertisements or banner advertisements. Yes, I want to leave that on because I want to support ComicFury. Show permalinks on your comic pages. I guess I have this set to no, but honestly, I don't really care. I probably could put that on yes. I don't know. Maybe I have to look into that. Yeah, so then we have some cosmetic settings here. You can look into this more so yourself. I have my comic front page set to the start of the latest chapter. I've got visitor settings. Again, allow ratings, allow comments, moderate comments. I have it set to no. Default webcomic view is on the customizable website view, but then you also have infinite scroll view. Block visitors from accessing the webcomic using the non-default view. Again, I'm not going to do anything like that. You can change webcomic time zone settings. You can change a lot, as you can tell. Everything looks good here, but yes, I just wanted to show you that you can make some changes on the edit settings page. You can add a webcomic avatar, which is what I have up here. And your webcomic avatar, it can only be 200 KB or 150 by 150 pixels. You can have a banner for your comic, which is what is right here. And that can only be 500 by 90 pixels. And then finally, I think the last thing I will show you is the layout. So as you can see here, you can edit your comics, your comic websites, JavaScript and CSS and HTML. There's a lot of stuff here, and I don't fully know how to mess with this. I personally wouldn't mess with this, but if you know some coding, you can do some pretty cool stuff on your site, and you can probably check out the forum, because I bet there's a lot of people within the forum of ComicFury that have a better idea on how to make changes or make edits, and there's probably some tips and tricks in there as far as small things that you can change or do to your site to make it a bit more interesting. Pretty much that's it. You can, of course, create blog entries to your website. You can upload extra files, as I showed you before. That's what my little author comment image is. It's an extra file that I uploaded, and you can upload as many extra files as you want, or at least I believe so, as long as they are under 6 megabytes. You can add a website page. You can edit website pages. You can make a new simple layout or reset to a pre-made layout. You can edit your author profile. That has to do with you as an actual user of the website. You can invite other authors to be a part of your comic if you'd like to do so. I've never done so myself. You can edit author permissions, which relates to the invited authors, and then you can set webcomic owners, and you can just simply leave webcomic. Don't know why you'd want to do that, but yeah, that's pretty much everything. ComicFury is a pretty cool website. It has a lot of options and gives you a lot of options, and I think it's a pretty great site to share your comic on. As I said, there is a forum, and it has a pretty great community. So definitely, I think this is a perfect website for sharing comics. All right, that's everything. This has been Avery of Sacred Vision Studio. Keep making comics, share your art, and have a great day. Bye-bye.